Hello, today we are going to be reviewing the Pythagorean theorem, okay? This is hopefully something that you have heard before, definitely from middle school. It involves the side lengths of a right triangle, okay? Now, when you have a right triangle, all right, you have three sides, but really you have one side that is important, okay? Two sides that I wouldn't say are that important are what we call the two legs of the right triangle. And then the side that is most important is called the hypotenuse, okay? And the hypotenuse is always the longest side, all right? It's also the side that is always across from your right angle. So if you draw an arrow straight across from your right angle, it is pointing at the hypotenuse, okay? The other two sides we call the legs. They are the two sides that create the right angle, all right? Now, when you have a right triangle, we use the Pythagorean theorem to find a missing side length, okay? Now, the two legs of the right triangle we label as A and B, and then the hypotenuse we label as C, all right? It is very important that the hypotenuse is C. The legs, it doesn't really matter as much which one is A and which one is B, because the Pythagorean theorem says that A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So regardless of which one is A or B, you're just adding them together, so you're going to get the same number regardless, whereas C squared always needs to be over here on the other side of the equal sign. So when you're looking at a triangle, you need to make sure that you know where C is, okay? That's the number that's by itself. So for this question right here, where is the hypotenuse? Well, we draw an arrow across from our right angle. We're pointing at the hypotenuse, so it's this side, which means that C is 12. That means that A is 8, and B is our missing side that we are trying to find. So we're going to plug our numbers into the Pythagorean theorem. That's going to give us 8 squared plus B squared equals 12 squared. And then you want to solve for your missing value. So we square both our numbers. 8 squared is 64, and 12 squared is 144. Then next we are going to subtract so that we can get B squared by itself. So B squared equals 144 minus 64, which is 80. And then your last step, you need to get rid of the squared, which is right here. And you do that by taking the square root of both sides. So you can start to see how we are building off of what we learned yesterday. So B is the square root of 80. And of course, we want to check and see, can we simplify this? We definitely can. 80 is divisible by 16. It's at 16 times 5. And the square root of 16 is 4. So our B value is 4 radical 5. And it's important that we make sure to check, can we simplify our number? Not always can you. Sometimes B just equals the square root of 13. You know, that can't be broken up. But 80 can definitely be broken up. Here is another problem. You got to kind of do the Pythagorean theorem twice. You guys can figure that out. What you're going to do for the rest of this is Pythagorean theorem word problems, okay? So for each of these questions, we know that we are going to have a right triangle, so we might as well draw a right triangle. And then we want to figure out, based on the question, what we label with what, okay? So Aubrey wants to zip line from the top of a 60-foot tree, okay? So that's important. We have a 60-foot tree standing straight up. So that is going to be over here on the left. You can kind of think of this side right here as our tree, okay? She is going to a spot on the ground. I'm going to switch my colors up here. She's ziplining to a spot on the ground that is 195 feet from the base of the tree, okay? So the base of the tree is at the bottom, and she's ziplining to a spot 195 feet away. So that is going to be this side down here at the bottom. And the question is, how long does her wire need to be? So when she's ziplining, she's starting at the top, she's ziplining down to a spot on the ground. So we are trying to find C here. That's where our X goes. You don't have to put X, you can put C, it doesn't matter. For these questions, all right, these word problems, we're not going to worry about simplifying the radical because these numbers are going to be huge, okay? You're definitely going to have to pull up Desmos on your calculator. I've got a calculator over here next to me. 60 squared is 3,600. 195 squared is 38,025. Okay, so these numbers are big. We're not going to worry about trying to find perfect squares that go into them. It's fine. We want to add these two numbers together now. So let me type that in. That's going to be 41,625 equals x squared. Now we take the square root of both sides, so I want to type in the square root of 41,625, and I get x equals 204. What does it say about rounding? Round to the nearest hundredth, okay? So that's 2 decimal places, so I want to go 0.02, all right? And that will be my answer. So this is pretty much what you're doing for these questions. Sometimes you're gonna know the hypotenuse and you're trying to find a leg, in which case you're gonna wanna solve it like this one up here. So you have 3, 4, and 5 that you guys can work on. The last thing that you guys are gonna do, it says write the Pythagorean theorem as a conditional statement. So you can interpret that as if a squared plus b squared equals c squared, then your triangle is right. Okay? And what this means is that this can be used as a test to kind of figure out if you have a right triangle, right? So if a squared plus b squared equals c squared, then we know that we have a right triangle, okay? If it's not, sometimes it might be bigger, right? So I'm gonna draw, I don't know if this is gonna work, but let's see. If we draw a right triangle here, okay? Actually, I don't want it to be like that. Okay, if you have a right triangle, sometimes, well, basically, if it's not a right triangle, you kind of have two choices, right? You could have basically an angle that's bigger than a right triangle, right? Like this angle down here is bigger than a right angle. It's an obtuse angle, okay? And as we see, in order to make that angle bigger, I had to add extra space over here. So that made the hypotenuse bigger, right? These sides didn't change. A and B stayed the same, but C got bigger, okay? So here C is too big, right? And so that means we have an obtuse triangle. So that is actually this formula right here. C squared is greater than, right? So if you have that, if c squared is too big, you have an obtuse triangle. If c squared is too small, right? So let me go back to what we had before. If c squared is too small, then that means that we have an acute angle. Is this going to work? Yeah, if c squared is too small, that means this is not a right angle, it's an acute angle, and you can see we have this extra space over here, so c has gotten smaller, right? So if c squared is less than a squared plus b squared, then you have an acute triangle. And so the Pythagorean theorem is kind of a test that if you just have 3 side lengths, you can figure out what kind of triangle you have. So that's what this is just asking right here. So if I look at an example, right, I have 3, 5, and 6. We know the hypotenuse always has to be the biggest side, so we know that 6 has to be C because it's the biggest number. So we want to check here what's happening, you know, when we plug 3, 5, and 6 into the Pythagorean theorem. Well, 3 squared is 9, 5 squared is 25, and 6 squared is 36. 9 plus 25 is 34, which we know 34 is less than 36. That means C is too big. It's greater than a squared plus b squared, which is this right here, this situation. So we know that this is an obtuse triangle. And that is pretty much it. You have 2 more examples down here that you can do. Hopefully that made sense to you. And if not, I will put another video that you can watch as well. Thanks and have a great day.